When we talk about weaknesses in default configurations, the list of places this can go wrong is almost limitless. Very frequently, you'll see web servers and indeed web application frameworks configured suboptimally when it comes to security. There are various reasons for this. One of them is convenience. Sometimes security does make things harder. Another is backward compatibility. Sometimes frameworks need to remain compatible with their prior implementations, and newer security paradigms are harder to implement without breaking that. Sometimes it can even be for performance reasons. Security can have an overhead. Let me give you one example of an implementation that is not as secure as what we'd like to see it. We're here on the sample vulnerable website. I'm going to hit F12 to bring up the developer tools, and then I'm going to press F5 to reload the page. Now I'm going to go and select the first request, and then scroll down and look at the response headers. And we can see quite a bit of information in here. We've got the server, IIS8, we saw that a little earlier on too. The ASP.NET version on 4, the ASP.NET MVC version on 5.1, and the powered by header being ASP.NET. All of this is leaking information about the internal implementation of this site, and indeed information about the server that it's running on. Now, I talk about the risk of this in my Ethical Hacking Web Applications course. And in fact, the example I give there is how you can use Shodan, which we just saw a little earlier on in this module, to find websites based on these response headers. Now, in a case like Drupal, which had a serious SQL injection vulnerability in 2014, you could then go to Shodan, search for Drupal, and find sites that were at risk, then immediately exploit them. That is a really serious security problem, and it's made possible by the fact that default configurations normally return this information in response headers. IIS does it, Apache does it, other web servers do it too, and it's simply not a behavior we want to see. So as soon as you turn on a new server, there's one thing right away that you want to start locking down. Now again, that is just one example of a weakness in a default configuration. And there are many, many others relating to the way applications run on web servers. Let me show you one other risk with default configurations. And it's this site here, defaultpassword.com. That's a pretty self-explanatory domain name, and it is exactly what it looks like. This is a list of default passwords for devices. And as I let that scroll through in the background, you'll be able to see many familiar names fly past. Routers, webcams, services like FTP and Telnet. Many of these have default passwords that ship with every implementation. I signed up for a new broadband connection the other day, and my password was the name of the provider 123. I think it's fair to say that everybody that signed up with that provider got exactly the same password. And this is really the problem, in that many of these devices ship with the default password and then people just leave it. It is a weakness in the default configuration. As it happens, when I set up my broadband connection the other day, I also purchased a wireless router separately, and that wireless router shipped with a card that had a unique set of credentials on it, which is obviously the way we'd like to see this done. My set of credentials for that device were absolutely unique, strongly unique. It wasn't a simple word for the password. But many devices that ship, such as the ones you see here, have these default credentials. So for you as an ethical hacker, when you're looking at a system or a device, establishing if it ships with the default password is a really good first step. And in many cases where default passwords are used, you will find that it is still the exact same password that it ships with, possibly a password on this page here. So that's weaknesses in default configurations, and they're just two examples of where it goes wrong. That rounds out web server misconfiguration. Let's go and summarize the module.